Good morning and welcome to Value First Leadership. I'm Chris Carolyn here with my favorite leadership transformation guru specialist, Tony Dowling. How you doing,
Well
man?
deserved on my part. Well deserved. I'm very well. I'm very well. Thank you for having me on. As usual, I've missed you. I've missed the listener or the viewer. But I have to say, you're lucky. I've made it today. It is hot in Wales.
It is
We
hot.
just we had our hottest ever day yesterday at 33 degrees. 33 degrees. The humidity is like 70+%. So that gives you some indication of how much I just melted all weekend. I've not done
Yeah,
anything.
that is hot.
It is hot. It is when
I'm
we
going to
used
choose
to.
not to do the math in my head right now of what that means. Pretty sure it's 100,
Yeah, I
100-ish,
think it's
right?
100-ish. Yeah. Was it
Yeah,
add double it and add 30 or 60 or something? I can't remember.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you survived or are surviving. I'm sure it might
Yes.
not be done
No,
yet,
it's
but
that's it. It's all over now. That we're back to normal now. It's like 17
yeah,
degrees now.
yeah, back to the good life. No, good to see you as always. We've been looking for a reason, to get back together, get back on the education train on LinkedIn. And Value First is starting to pick up a little bit of momentum in terms of just, really what this is me just trying to target everything I've ever come into contact with that relates to smart people not being able to make common sense decisions
Yeah.
in their
Yep.
organizations. And, this one, they all have a way to be like fairly insidious in how hard it is to break free. But we juxtaposition it against the authority trap, which is this idea that we must control everything to
Yep.
conquer, to find efficiency, to optimize this whole industrial age mentality. And today we're talking about principle one from the Value First Leadership Manifesto, which is very much the opposite of that. Not controlling outcomes, but enabling them. Um, and you've been on a journey this past year or so since we've been doing content. So I know you'll have some interesting points to make. But when you saw that post from me today, because we've been talking about doing this show for a while,
Yeah.
but just getting my stuff together related to these topics, and you saw, this on the schedule. What came to mind?
Mm. I think the first thing I thought, I remembered, and we haven't been apart for that long, but I remember how aligned we are in terms of our thinking. And I've had this thought process around leadership, particularly for a long time now. And obviously most of that has been in isolation. We've not known each other that long. It's been a year or so that we've talked. But this goes back to my first roles, my first leadership training, when I believe I was taught to do it properly. And since lived many leadership positions, and as you mentioned, transformation positions as well. But I am like you, I'm a little bit, I do get frustrated, I think, that we know this stuff now and it's taught so ubiquitously, is everywhere. Yet so many organizations are still trapped, they're still trapped in this. And you're absolutely right, I think, to talk about the industrialized society that we're sort of trying to break out of. We're in like industry 4.0 or something now, and it feels like we're still in industry 1.0, and this command control thing. But it psychologically is really interesting as well. And this is the other aspect of it. I wonder how much of all of this is human nature, right? So to actually become an effective leader today and to enable, as you've talked about, to get out of the way of your people, hire great people and then get out of their way, requires an enormous amount of trust. And I think it also requires an enormous amount of trust in yourself, which is, I don't know, maybe that's the key, the trigger. Maybe that's the thing that undermines it, because when you can't trust yourself and you can't trust your team, this is when you end up micromanaging. This is when you end up falling into what I call the management trap. You'll have a similar phrase for it, but where we just think it's easier and quicker to do it ourselves. If you want to multiply your business, if you want to grow your business, you want to multiply yourself through the people in your team, you have to get out of that trap now as fast as you can.
And I'm sure, any savvy leader could find a way to spin these things to mean the same thing. But for you, like the difference between, uh, controlling outcomes and creating the space, for value creation. I'm sure that's what a lot of leaders think that they're doing when they create all this process and create all these control systems. But why are they different?
Funnily enough, I was just reading a post on LinkedIn. I won't mention who it was from, but it's somebody talking about the problem I specialize in the adoption gap, as we call it. How do they get people to to use the CRM? They've built the processes, they put the system in place, and so on and so on. I don't think people realize how much transformation is required to get a business working in a CRM. If it qualify that, if you're going to use the CRM as a platform for your business, then it requires change, and that requires probably change not only in the processes but in the way that you manage and the way people manage. But to go back to the question, what's the difference? It's very, very difficult. You need guidelines, you need caveats, you need guardrails, you need alignment, and this is the way to drive this: is alignment. Hiring people who want the same things for the same reasons as you and the organization do, but you cannot be too prescriptive. So the thing about process mapping for sales teams is the ideal one. When you've got a leader process mapping for a sales team, and the sales team have no understanding, no idea, there's no reference for them in that process map. Somebody's decided off the top of their head, right, this is what the sales process is going to be. And then we find there's not actually going to be a sales process anyway. It's going to be a sales methodology, which makes it even worse. Sales processes are really simple. You meet a client in some description, you talk to the client in some description, you ask the client to buy in some description. That's about it. Your CRM doesn't need make an appointment, send them an email, buy them a cup of coffee, and all the things that you see. That should be decided by the team. If you're going to hire a great salesperson and get out of their way, you trust that salesperson to bring you the results. Now, it's fair to say, if the salesperson isn't bringing results, then you probably need a default. You probably need a standard operating procedure. The way I would view it would be, if you're on target, you can do what you want. If you're not on target, you'll do what I say. And I don't claim that my way is the best way or the only way to do it, but I do know that way works. So until you get up and running, until you get to where you need to be, do it that way. The safety net, the guardrail. But the whole point now, and this all comes down to creativity, I think, Chris. And this is the rub really for leaders. And maybe if they're not creative themselves, possibly, or are afraid of creativity in the business, what happens if this guy goes off? You have to be set up to allow the people working for you to fail. If this is going to work, you have to give them room to fall over and make mistakes. If you don't do that, then you're just going to find yourself in this ever-decreasing circle of correcting and controlling and dictating and making everything smaller for them. But if you give them a problem and you say to them, I don't really know how to solve this problem, you're the expert. I'm a manufacturer, or I'm a designer, or I'm a management accountant, or you're the salesperson. Here's the problem. How do you solve that problem? And you let them go out and solve that problem. That's when you unlock this real power. I say, if they can't do it or they're in training, you've got to give them those guardrails. But the whole point here is to allow somebody who's got a flair, somebody's got a creative bent, somebody who thinks creatively about this problem, to allow them to flourish in that sort of environment. Now we know, because science has established this, we know that controlling that sort of creativity, reducing its its breadth, reducing the somebody's ability to be creative themselves, reduces productivity, reduces effectiveness. We know, and this is crazy, we know even providing a commission to a salesperson reduces their creative effectiveness. We know this. This is established in science. This is a true fact, as you Americans would say. Yet we still do it. I'm not gonna pay this great salesperson what he's worth. I'm going to give him a return on the investment. I'm going to give him a percentage of what he earns. That'll be a real incentive, and it is an incentive. It is an incentive, but it's probably an incentive to do the wrong things. It's probably an incentive to sell people for the wrong reasons. Not to sell people for their own good, not to advise people, good or bad, whether they should be using the product, just to sell people. It's an incentive to sell. It's not an incentive to do good work or to do good business. So
why
that's
are we there if science says all this stuff? And this is a lot of what we're trying to accomplish here. It's like common sense is just all around us. Yet leaders cannot move away from this model of command and control and really controlling the outcome of revenue is what they think they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's a work back plan. Okay, if we need this much revenue, this is how I think it should work. But this is how I've seen these other companies do it. This is what the SaaS companies tell me the best practices. We're just going to do it that way. Even though, as you mentioned, there's so much data and experience to tell us that these methods reduce results. Why can't we break free from this?
Because we're talking to the wrong customer. This is my view. So instead of the customer, generally those sorts of firms have another customer they don't even realize that they're answering to, and that's the shareholder. And the shareholder doesn't have the patience, the shareholder doesn't have the understanding, the shareholder wants the return, and they want the return. This is the way it was built. I'm not having a go at shareholders. That's the game. That's what they do, right? But a business can't have two masters. It can't have a customer as the master and a shareholder as a master at the same time. I know we think it can, but it can't. It'll have one superior to the other. And hopefully it's the customer that is superior, but it's usually not. Because, if you're a VC funded and you need to get the next tranche of money in, or you need to go to the market and get some more, you need to raise more funds, or you've got a big quarter coming up and you need to pay, there's so much pressure on people. And it's a human nature thing. Again, I think, when it's time to trust, we don't. When it's time to open up, we close. When it's time to get creative, we fall back on the ways that we've seen it work before. When it's time to do the things, the expansive, the value first thing, it's really hard to do. And it's usually because somebody above us, we've all got a boss, somebody above us is dictating the way that we work. Now, in organizations where they don't have that, where they have the long game, let's say, maybe their third sector or what do they call them these days? An org, a .org organization, B Corp. They may be working to they call it the third bottom line. They may be working to a sustainability bottom line or an engagement bottom line or something else. They can do it because that's what they're actually being measured on. And that, those organizations have, but it's interesting, those organizations often have a reputation for being a bit airy-fairy, a bit arty-farty, a bit wishy-washy, because it's all these number crunchers that are going to win. Yeah. And we just see it time and time again. We just see it doesn't work. It works efficiently, but you miss the potential. You get out of it what you think you should be getting out of it, or you kill it.
Right.
Right.
You gotta get so unicorn lucky in terms of product, a high quality product that is easy to scale, creates scalable business, is the right time in the market, and just everything is going right for that, like to win out. But I think you're right, like that. If you know that there's a quarterly dividend to hit, right? it forces smart people to make really, really nonsensical decisions when they can. And that's again where the whole framework is like, okay, the system is broken, right? And you don't have to look very far to hear about the 1, 2, 3 person orgs that are just starting to dominate with AI because they don't have any of this industrial infrastructure or mindset in place to stop them, right? And that's ultimately like this mindset, this infrastructure is not long for this world,
Mhm.
right? Like you simply have to be able to make common sense decisions with agility, with confidence, with quickness. And, but with some empathy, like it makes sense where the shareholder wants control, wants predictability, wants to be able to forecast effectively. Then the leader wants to do that too, even when they're not a shareholder, right?
Mm.
They want control. Like human brain wants control, wants certainty, right? But then if you're a leader in this spot, understand that since we're talking about sales, like salesperson wants that too.
Mm.
And if they're just if they're asked to blindly follow a process, they don't have control. Like they need to be able to say, oh, this is different in this conversation. So we're just going to go right to the close.
Mm.
We're going to skip all this other CRM nonsense that you put in front of me. And the last thing I want you to do is to scold me when I bring the deal home without having any of that stuff into the CRM, right? Which is what happens.
So as you know, I'm a real data geek. I think it comes from my science background, which I don't talk about an awful lot, but I started out in science, and I think we use data so badly in business that it's not funny. Not only the example that we've already given, where social sciences particularly tell us the more we constrain a creative process, the less effective and efficient it is, right? So put in the terms and conditions that you just talked about, commissions or anything else, any kind of condition on your ability to solve the problem restricts your ability to solve the problem, and has been proven by experiment over and over and over and over again, right? But it leads to this bigger question, do people even really understand what's going on? So in most of our organizations, big and small, in most small organizations, they're not even forecasting, that I find. They're not even doing it, right? At best, it's a gut feel, which is probably more accurate than in a bigger organization where you have this crazy situation. I've got a thumbs up for
Gut
myself.
feels. We do like gut feels.
We do
It-
like a gut feel.
That's what this whole show is about, actually.
Yeah. But we have this insane situation where, I worked in corporate for a long time, and, I'd have this Friday conversation, every Friday, same conversation. I'd have to give a forecast. When I started out, it was my sales forecast against my personal target to my sales manager. And they'd go, you're not forecasting target. And I'd say, that's because I haven't got enough out there to get to target. Well, I can't put that forecast in. I said, well, forecast whatever you want. Well, I'll forecast you for target. Okay. And then when I was a sales manager, I'd have my sales director come to me and say, you're not forecasting enough. And I said, well, I'm telling you what's out there. And they say, well, you've got to massage that bit. You've got to tweak that bit. Go back to the guys. You got to get some more money. I'm like, where am I going to get the money from? So this game, right, comes where I'd go, this is how much you're going to get. And then the person above me would say, it's not enough. And I'd go, cool, say whatever you want. I'm going to get, now I can point to, I ran these experiments again. I can point to hitting the number I always said I was going to, because it was based on science. It was based on the forecast and what the salesperson's average conversion rates were and call rates and the business they had out there and, numbers, data. Whereas going up the pipe were increasingly fictional forecasts. And the bigger the organization, the bigger that becomes. Suddenly, the business is in trouble. And it's in trouble because it's not made its quarter one, quarter two, quarter three forecast, because it's sitting off the pace against the forecast. This is the crazy ass part, right? And somebody, the chief exec's like, we're terrible at forecasting. You're not terrible at forecasting. You're making it up. You're not even forecasting. You're just making numbers up. The whole industry, the whole thing is being propped up by people making shit up. It's absolutely mental. When you think about it, it is crazy insane. That forecast is not enough. Okay. Ooh, I'll go back to the team. Oh, I've managed to find another 20 grand. Fantastic. Where did you find it? Well, I can't tell you that because this is a family show, you know. I pulled it out. Like, no, I can't say that.
That's what it feels like. I mean,
Yeah, of course it is.
and then you tie compensation to those made up numbers, right? It's the most ridiculous cycle when you take a step back. Because the worst thing ever for a marketer, especially, is you come in and you start doing a great job, exactly what you're asked to do, build pipeline, and just put the salespeople in a great situation to close. And then you find out that they're sandbagging at the end of the year because they've already hit the target. So they already hit the bonus. But the next forecast is based on whatever they end the year at and not like reality of pipeline. So if they can hold off on closing these deals until the next year, now their bonus is easier to hit. And like just that is happening everywhere.
Targets are even worse than forecasts, right? So here's the thing. As a sales leader for a long time, I know because I tried it and I tried different ways, and you know, this is the best way. If you have if you have a failing salesperson, if a salesperson is at that 3-month mark where they've missed their target, what do? You reduce their target. You reduce their target to the point where they can hit it easily. Why? Because it is a weird ass phenomenon that salespeople, and probably most people, when they get that 100%, feel better about themselves. Even if their target was previously 10,000 and now it's 1,000, there's a little piece of them that goes, woohoo! And when they get that little bit of confidence build, then they may build it back up, and then they may build it back up. You do not maintain the target. You do not pressurize them. Here I am, judging my entire self-worth by the number on the whiteboard. Now, my manager is telling me that I am no good as a human, as a person, as a contributor to the team, as a part of the culture, because I'm not hitting my number. Not only that, if I don't do the things that they want me to do and then hit my number, I'm going to be out of a job. This is the most insane way to run a team you can imagine. It just doesn't make any sense. You talk about marketers, salespeople are just the same. Salespeople won't go beyond target because they don't want their target to be put up.
Yeah.
Now imagine, right? Imagine we didn't have any targets. Imagine we didn't have any commissions. Imagine we paid people fairly for the job that they were doing. Why have you got to compensate them on the amount of money they bring in? Why have you got to have some, probably borderline psychotic who bills the most money getting all of the reward out of the business? Why are you going to do that? They're not delivering that value usually. They're just borderline psychotic. They don't have a home life. They have
Yes.
they're able to close more money than everybody else. Great, they've got talent. That's fantastic. So reward them fairly for that, right? But don't buy them jet planes and Porsches and all that sort of stuff. That's not fair. It's not fair. It's just not when there are people below them in the organization who are actually delivering the stuff. Not when they're pissing clients off. Not when they're stepping on their colleagues' toes, or worse, standing on their shoulders and pushing them underwater to get where they need to get because they're competitive. It's frankly a bizarre way to run an organization, but it is rooted in the industrial past when the job was the more you did per hour, the more widgets that went through, the more money you made. Production orientation makes a shitload of sense. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. If you could just do that a bit faster, I'll tell you what, if we got 5 lines on, we'd have 5 times as much stuff. Genius. It doesn't work like that. Now it doesn't work like that, especially not with, where are we? Yes, we're 40 minutes in, 30 minutes in, especially with AI coming along. When AI takes away the production, and there ain't going to be any production for us to do because AI is doing it all, how are you going to reward people?
Yeah, not the same incentives. That's for sure. And that's, I think, what we're getting to is when you start from the controlled outcome place and you think everything is a factory, like just like we had to create 40-hour work week and retirement as incentives to get people to show up every day to this job that was likely not fulfilling. And this whole incentive mindset, like when you're trying to control and bring people into a process that they didn't create themselves, they had no part in it, they don't like feel valued, there's no purpose. You create these incentives because that's the only way to get them to do what you're asking them to do.
And they kind of
But
work
if
in that scenario as well, right? When the work is hard, when it's physical, when it's it's task orientated, then it makes sense. When the work is not that, then it doesn't make
right.
sense.
Yeah, that's where like it can be it's very much math and like forecast and like add one more machine, get this much more output. Add one more person, get this much more output. That is the industrial complex that works on operations side. It does not work on the customer facing side because it's humans dealing with other humans, and it's basically the opposite of math,
Mm.
right? Like, but guess what we try to do? 1,000 leads equals 100 deals, and we will close 10, and everything, every piece of the system will be based on optimizing those numbers. And if we're going to sell 10 over here, that means we need 10 more guys to sell 100. And so how do we, like, what are some options for like enabling? Because you can't really, it's just different incentives. And this is where you do the work as a leader to understand like what your people care about, what
It's
they find
it,
value in.
I think that's a big part of it, right? But I also think it's just a bigger question. I think you've got to address the bigger questions. Now, I would argue over the last 100 years, the organization that has changed the most in the face of the way the world has changed is actually the military. They call it the industrial military complex, right? These guys have moved from, in 1940, 41, World War II era, they started to realize that actually just throwing more and more men into the meat grinder wasn't working. The defense, everything had changed. We had mechanized infantry, we had mechanized artillery, we had armor, we had airplanes, and suddenly it wasn't just about overwhelming the opposition's force with more men. That's basically how read the Art of War. It said never start a fight with somebody's got more men than you, because it's like those games that you get. You got 70, they got 100, you can lose. And we get to the point where now these guys are fully autonomous in the field. These are teams in the field, and they have realized that this is not about command and control. It's not about discipline like it used to be, and everybody wearing the same uniform and everybody marching to the same drum, literally, and everybody carrying the same gun and so on and so on. These guys in the military, they're planning for missions at a level so far above what organizations are doing. It's just not funny. It's just insanely intricate, their planning, because at the same time as the planning, they keep it simple because they have to, because the bottom line there is life and death. It's not making a couple of quid. It's not hitting your shareholders' arbitrary target, a number somebody's made up. It's surviving, and they realize the most important thing in their army are the people. So suddenly they started taking care of them, and they started giving them body armor and putting them behind tanks and things like that, so perhaps they wouldn't get killed. And now we're not even sending them to the front. There are drones and what have you doing the fighting, because they have changed so dramatically. The military has changed so dramatically. So why are they able to do that? I think because of the people make so much difference. The people are so important to the military, and in organizations we're not there. We're still not there. The people, the customer isn't important. The people who work for us isn't important. Who's the first person, right? When you go in, if you go in as a BC or a turnaround expert, the first people you get rid of in the organization, the ones with the most experience, the ones with the highest salaries, the ones who know everything. What? Oh, that guy's been here 30 years. Get rid of him. Are you mental? He should be in charge. You know, the people are not important. So I think that this is what I mean by we have to think bigger. We have to think about, you know, the incentive is happy people. The incentive, happy. Can you imagine that on a shareholder agreement? A happy person index. The incentive is retaining workers, retaining customers, growing value, growing relationships. We don't care about it. We don't care about it. We just care about 5% return for investors. We care about squeezing another few pounds out of the customer. We care about, you know, getting little Indian fellas to build it for us because they'll do a hell of a lot cheaper than we will. It's just absolutely crazy. And until that approach, the military got rid of it, right? The military are like, we can't just keep throwing millions of people into the meat grinder. In World War One, you know, battles like Passchendaele, they were obscene. They were absolutely obscene. It literally just keep throwing people in, just keep getting more. They were shipping. It was a conveyor belt, Chris, of young men going to the front and dying. Right? And when, you know, finally, thank God, finally they started to see the light. But our businesses still haven't. It's a waste. It's a waste of human capital. It's a waste of our relationship with our customers. It's a waste of the relationship we have with our people.
Dad,
Excuse me a second.
Yep.
Yes.
I
Mum
think
said there was pears on the bottom.
it's huge in terms of it's first principles. Like we talk about, all these businesses talk about value creation, right? You always hear about that. Like, and that's where everybody involved knows the game. And if they're not feeling any of that value, or they don't even get to participate in the value creation because they're spending time following process that they know creates friction for them or their neighbors or the customers. Is it as simple as that? Of just coming back to like, how are we creating value for each other internally so that we can create value for the customer, right?
With very simple machines for turning beer into urine. You know, value is the question. What value are we talking about? When we're talking about shareholder value, we have an extremely narrow definition. And that's what narrows the focus. That's what narrows the incentives. That's what narrows and creates the pressure and everything else. If we broaden that out to look at value to our customers, value for the people who work for us, value for the people who are running the business, for sure, value to the environment. But, you know, when you look at value per se, then you open your eyes to all this other value that you're able to create. And that's what I mean by the bigger thinking about value. You know, who else is benefiting, and can we incentivize to that? Can we play to that or move to that? Why do we just have to keep looking at these extremely narrow concepts that we have?
Yeah.
And this is why I'm so excited by AI, because I think it's going to change all that. You know, it'll have to. What are you suddenly going to do with 300 million Americans and 200 million Russians and 300 million Europeans? Where we've got nothing to do.
Yeah. Well, we got other shows for that. But I think, and that's where, as a leader, you've probably proven yourself, proven that you need a little help answering this question. So instead of feeling like you're the one that has to answer the question of value creation, like how do you create value, ask your people.
Yep.
They will be able to answer that question in ways you have not dreamed of, right? And that's the thing. You have to trust their answers, right?
Yeah.
And then get serious about creating that space. And I'll tell you what, it's not always going to be measurable. It's not always going to be tied tiable to the bottom line. We were just talking about Wake Up Customer Platform, like this concept of mental load, which when you don't have to double check everything, when stuff is just flowing the way it needs to, similar to the difference between when you're in a growing company as a leader, you're still small and you can walk around and you can know everybody, right? You can know everything that's going on. There's just like a lot less mental load for everybody involved because there's that direct contact. As soon as you scale out of that, right, all these systems and processes and all this attempt at control just creates all this anxiety and mental burden on everybody, which has all of these, again, scientifically proven detrimental impact to productivity.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's, if you take away anything from today's episode, it's ask that question to your team. Like, how do you create value? How would you like to create value? What does value mean to you as an individual contributor, as a team leader, as a fellow leader on the board? Like, man, if we can get some of these shareholder groups start answering these questions like this, which there are some out there, like, but it's not saying it's easy. But if you don't start soon, you're going to get left behind pretty quickly, because even AI, if that's got to be your first step, ask an AI about value creation inside of your organization. Like, do that. Because the new people on the scene, as they start a business, they are going to be asking AI those questions. AI is going to be giving them very good answers, and they will have nothing in the way of implementation, right? So the time is now, and that's why we're going to start showing up every Monday, to help people through this journey.
It's such a good, if I've got 1 minute, such a good solution to talk to your people, right? To make it be what do they call it? Be there's different types of leaders. I can't remember. Benevolent dictator. Be a benevolent dictator, right? So you're in charge, right? But be kind and and listen to your teams. I saw the greatest show on leadership training that I've seen for a long time yesterday on Sunday morning. Is a show called Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares US. I've never seen it before, right? And what you realize after watching one or two of these shows, what you realize is basically what he's doing. He's going in and he's showing these leaders how to lead these organizations. And in almost every case, right, there was a team there being failed by the leader, a team who loved the restaurant, who loved the customers, who loved the work, loved the job. In one case, I can't remember who it was, but in New Orleans, they weren't getting paid at the end of some shifts, these guys, because they were making so little money, and the boss was like cutting their legs off by buying cheap crap to serve, and the reputation was good. And almost literally all she had to do was listen to what the team wanted to do. They were all experienced in the business. So this is such, we're in it together. You're not on your own. You're gone are the days of a leader being on the top floor, and looking down on everybody. Those organizations will fail. They will die.
Yeah.
Talk to the team. Do it with us. Come and talk to us about it. We'll talk to you about it.
In the most serendipitous of ways, you have led us right into what we're going to be talking about next week. In that is how to distribute authority, to the people who have the knowledge, the people that are on the front lines, instead of being the bottleneck at the top.
Yeah. Hey, this show's not just thrown together.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, we like to think we know what we're talking about sometimes. And we appreciate everybody, listening and watching. And I appreciate you, Tony, coming back to have these important conversations.
Fantastic conversation as always. Can't wait for next week. Really look forward to it.
Have a great week, everybody.